It's our beliefs that shape our timing, our actions, and our results. I can't tell you how many times throughout my life that the way I believed, the way I thought about myself, the way I pictured myself in the world shaped the results that I got. And it wasn't until I reshaped, reformed, renewed my mind into seeing myself fully, or as fully as I can in a moment, how God sees me and how the people He's put in my life have seen me for the positive. When I accepted that, when I accepted those new belief systems, those new paradigms, that's when things started to shift in my life. And I want to tell you that to change your world, it first starts with changing your mind. And when you change your mind, you will be surprised. You will be absolutely surprised at how changing and renewing your mind shapes your destiny, shapes your reality. When my belief was shaky, so was the fruit that I produce. But when I stood on solid truth, on a solid rock, that's when everything changed in my life and continues to change. And when I was finally able to let go of those paradigms, first of all, it didn't come easy. It did not come easily to me to let go. I tell people all the time that it was because of tragedies in my life, a series of tragedies that I started to realize slowly and painfully that I was trying to control every outcome. I was trying to control the timing and the pacing of my destiny and my purpose. And through a series of what some might consider unfortunate events, but in hindsight, they were not unfortunate because they led me to the place of reckoning. They led me to the place where I could see my reality for what it really was, not the fabricated reality that I wanted to exist, and not even for the lies that I started to believe. So I was caught between this fabricated reality of who I thought I should be and the lies that I allowed myself to believe internally and externally. So through these series of quote unquote unfortunate events, I had to come to a place of surrender. And when I surrendered, that brought me into, for the first time in my life, I would say, into alignment. And I say alignment because there was a path, there was a purpose made for me before Mary White and Thaddeus Ford Sr. ever met. And through the circumstances of my life, some because of my own decisions and some decisions that were made around me, I got off the path. And then again, through that series of unfortunate events, I was brought to a place of surrender. And you can get to, I mean, you can imagine, picture in your mind what surrender looks like. Surrender is waving the white flag. Surrender is falling to your knees. And I was brought down to my knees. And rather than continuing to fight my way back up to this unaligned life, this wrong path, I finally came to a place where I knew this is it. So when I surrendered, again, one of the strongest things that I did for myself, essentially, I got out of the way and let God be God. And the funny thing is that in my experiences, and I'm sure it will be in yours if it hasn't already been, that when we remove ourselves from controlling the outcomes of everything in our lives, where we will be amazed at how much space is left for God to fill that void and actually do what he promised he would do for you. So we're not called to orchestrate every circumstance in our lives. We're called to obedience. We're called to do the thing that we were created to do when we're supposed to do it, when we're called to do it. Timing is everything. Timing and obedience is everything. This paradigm shift that we're talking about, it starts when you start to question your beliefs about yourself and ultimately your beliefs about God. Because how we view God, our source, our creator, essentially sets the tone to how we believe and what we believe about ourselves. The truth of the matter is, you can't walk in power if you're inundated with lies. So let's break that down. I think that's a powerful statement. So, most of us, from the time we're born, and even some of us before we're born, all of us are shapen in iniquity, which means that we come into this world, even the tiniest baby, we come into this world. We're beautifully, fearfully, and wonderfully made, but we come into this world shaped by the parents that we are born to. We're shaped by their lives, the environment we're born into, all these things. We come into this world already with the deck stacked against us, as the colloquialism goes. But the reality is that from that time up until wherever you find yourself now, we're collecting experiences. We're collecting good and bad experiences. And after a certain while, for some of us it's sooner, for some of us it's later, but all of us come to a place where we have a collection of lies that we knowingly or unknowingly believe and walk in. And in my experience, more times than not, it's the lies that you don't even know that you're believing in, the lies that you don't even realize you're walking in are the biggest culprits. It's not oh, well, I screwed this up and yeah, I get that. And, I dropped the ball here. Oh, yeah, I understand that. I was there. So I get it. It's not really those lies. It's the covert. It's the ones that lie in the darkness. It's the ones that hide out, that are veiled to us, that are usually the culprits that we're walking in and believing in, that really affect how we see ourselves. And this belief thing is so powerful. I watch sports. I used to watch more sports when I was younger than I do now, and that's another subject for another time. But I really enjoy the NBA. I grew up in the time of Michael Jordan and and Kobe, and then later in life, um, Curry and his squad. But my heyday was really the Jordan era, and then the Kobe era. But and also NFL, love football, Saints fan, die hard, right? And so I love the analogy or the reality that if you're playing to not lose, then chances are you probably will lose. There's a certain tenacity, there's a certain assertiveness when we believe that we can win, that propels us, that drives us, right? I think about Sean Payton, the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, in their one and only Super Bowl in 2009. It's never happened before, and it's never happened since. He called an onside kick, and if you don't know football, it's essentially like a trick play where you're supposed to be kicking it off down the field to the opponent so they can run it back. You essentially kick it shorter, catching them off guard to try to get the ball back in your possession. And it happened right after halftime. The second half commenced, which makes it even rarer, right? And so you can only make a move like that when you are convinced, first and foremost, that you can win this game. So you're going to take risks that you wouldn't normally take if you're trying to protect yourself from losing. Sean Payton wasn't protecting himself or the team from losing. He was trying to instill a confidence in them, a belief in them that no, you can win. And because I know you can win, we're going to take this risky play. And it turned out in our favor. So when you play life to not lose by protecting yourself, by playing small, you're essentially saying to yourself and everybody around you that I don't believe I can win. So whatever I've got right now, I've got to protect it. I've got to keep it, right? There's a different posture that we take when we believe we can win. So my question to you is, what limiting beliefs are you currently walking in that are preventing you from walking boldly and powerfully towards your destiny? My wife and I are currently watching this series, I think it's on Amazon Prime, called The House of David. And David, King David, Shepherd David, musician David, poet David, warrior David is by far, outside of Christ himself, my favorite character, my favorite person in the Bible. And one of the things that I love most about David is that the way he was described, particularly when he was a shepherd and anointed, he had some gifts and talents that weren't necessarily celebrated. They weren't, gifts and talents that were, the pride of Israel or the pride of the father. He wasn't seen as a warrior. He wasn't seen as, he wasn't, they describe him as not being exceptionally tall. And I believe they used the word ruddy, which has always been an interesting word to me. But the thing that made him exceptional was his faith. He had many talents, but the thing that made him exceptional was his faith. And when he was anointed king, he didn't necessarily believe it initially, nor did his brothers, and so forth and so on. So it took a while, the process of him believing that he was to become king. And I would submit that it was when he came face to face with the giant Goliath that he then saw himself for the first time, maybe, as king. Because essentially his mindset shifted from, I'm just a shepherd boy, I'm not as tall as my brothers, I'm not a warrior like my brothers, and so how can I be king? Because obviously in those days, and to some degree today, we judge people based on external appearances, on the validity of their worth, as it were. We judge people by what they look like, what they appear to us, what they've accomplished, and so forth and so on. But God looks on the inside, and he saw a shepherd boy who was full of faith, who was to become king. And so when David started to believe he could be king, he started to act like it. And I would, in my mind, and I'm not certain if this is biblically accurate or not, but in my mind, as he was running towards that giant, then the belief in him grew and grew stronger and stronger with every step towards this giant that was standing in his way of the thing that God promised him. So then the question is, what if you believed everything that God has said about you at this point in your life? What if you sought God, first and foremost, what do you think about me, God? And actually believed that you are loved and that you were created for such a time as this? What would you do different? How would you walk and talk? Would you boast in your abilities and what you're able to do and what you've been able to do all on your own? Or would you, if you could actually have a glimpse into the magnificence of who you were created to be? And let's pause right there, because oftentimes, especially in this day and age, we confuse visions of grandeur. We confuse this fabricated version of us that social media presents to us, that celebrity culture presents to us, and then we start to ascribe that to dreams and visions that God has actually buried in our hearts. So what does that mean? That means that we've got to separate our fleshly desire or fleshly desires, our ego's desires, from the beauty of the gift that God placed in our heart. I think that's paramount. I think, and in my experiences, and many of the people that I know and love and trust, in their experiences, God will take that thing, that dream, that vision that He placed in you, that was then perverted by your flesh, by your ego, by your arrogance. He will take that thing and show you how it's not going to be tainted by you. It's not going to be tainted, and you won't be able to boast and brag about it. You will only be able to say, if it wasn't for God in my life, this wouldn't exist. And that's my testimony. There were so many hopes and dreams that I had in my life that weren't necessarily going according to the timeline. They didn't look like I thought they should look. They weren't in the city that I thought it would be in. They weren't with the people that I thought would be here with me. But in 2025, I can tell you that God's timing, God's version of my purpose far exceeds what my version was. And I'm so happy that He killed and is still killing whatever egocentric version that I created in my mind through comparison, through social media, through celebrity worship, through idol worship. He's killing it. He has killed most of it, a lot of it, but there are still some things that try to linger. And so we just have to distinguish between God's purpose and will for our lives and the AI version that we've created for ourselves. So the question is, what would you do differently if you knew you had the favor of God? And there's something that you need to know and believe, that God is not just with you, He's for you. He loves you. And in my personal experience, so much weight was lifted off of me, off of my shoulders. Years of weight and burden were lifted off of me when I believed that God loves me and His favor rests upon me. So much weight. And a lot of us are traversing through this world, connecting with people, working jobs, building things, tearing things down, just having a human experience, not knowing that our human experience can be so much more fulfilling if we walked in the power and belief that God is not only with us, He's for us. And with God's favor, that doesn't mean that the road is going to be easy, right? One of my favorite gospel songs is by James Cleveland, Reverend James Cleveland. It's one of those old, I don't know, that came out the 70s or something. But I don't feel no ways tired. I've come too far from where I've started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. I don't believe He brought me this far to leave me. Most people are under the misconception that if I have God's favor, then that means, I'm not going to face any trials or tribulations, and that this thing He's called me to do is just going to be, there's going to be like a road, and it's going to be paved with gold. There's going to be violins on one side, violas on the other, cellos and basses, and maybe some herald trumpets. Like, that's going to be the road. And they're going to be throwing rose petals and so forth and so on. And at the end of it, they're going to hand me beignets, right? That's not the road. The road to your destiny and your purpose is paved with insecurity. It's paved with pain. It's paved with trials and tribulations. But every bump in the road is another notch in your belt, that when you get there, wherever there is, that you will have a certain tenacity, you will have a certain knowing, uh, you will have experiences and a track record behind you that says, if it hadn't been for God on my side, I wouldn't be here. And then once you get there, guess what? You get to do it again. Kobe Bryant, one of my most favorite athletes of all times, I read an interview, or I heard an interview with him where he talked about he took about a day, day and a half to celebrate his championship victories. And then after that, it was like time to get back to work. Whereas most people would take weeks, if not months, of celebrating and interviews and going here and doing that and so forth and so on, right? But Kobe's mentality was, it took work to get here, celebrate the victory, but now it's on to the next level. And the next level, you get to repeat the cycle. You get to repeat the cycle of trial and tribulation, tragedy to triumph. So when we believe and understand that this is not hype or hustle, then what's left to do? What's left to do is, again, to hear from God so that he can remind us of our purpose, his purpose for our lives, and we align our will with his. So then the question is, why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing that like we know we should? What road are you afraid to take? What dreams have you buried? And the biggest question, what changes in you when you know that you were already chosen for such a time as this? When there's no question in your mind, what changes then? What changes on the inside of you? So I want you to remember that you were chosen for such a time as this. You were chosen for this moment. You were chosen to be where you are, in that family that you're in that community that you're in that skin that you're in. You were chosen. God made no mistakes when it came to you. You were chosen to be born into a broken home. You were chosen to have that infirmity. You were chosen to go through that accident. You were chosen. So if you believe that, and you simultaneously believe that God is for you, then what changes are you going to make, starting with your belief system about yourself that says, I know that whatever I've been through, whatever I'm going through, is only going to make me stronger so that I could stand and step boldly in the purposes and will for my life as set by my Creator, God the Father. So that is what I want you to take away from this podcast, that there is so much more life to live, but it's not in grind set mindset. It's not in striving for things. It's freedom. It's freedom in surrendering control over the people, places, and things that you've tried to control and manipulate your entire life, including yourself, trying to will yourself into this thing, trying to, figure out, how can I look more closely? How can I look like the Joneses? How can I get the Joneses to think I've arrived? How can I get this group of people who don't matter to accept me? How can I accept me? Those days are over. The days of regret are over. Destiny is at hand. It's time to shift our minds, shift our paradigms into walking, talking, thinking, believing boldly in the fact that we are who God says we are. We can have what he says we can have. He is a father. He is a restorer, and he loves you.